Clint Eastwood does not change his mind. If you know anything about Clint Eastwood, anything real, anything beneath the squinting and the silence and the 40-year career of playing men who are absolutely certain of exactly what they are going to do, you know this about him. He decides. He moves. He does not revisit. He had been working on the same screenplay for almost 8 months. A Western, lean, cold, built around a single idea that he had been carrying since he saw a film in Italy 4 years earlier. He had written and rewritten it. He had argued with the studio about it. He had rejected feedback from writers, producers, directors whose work he respected. The script was done. Then he walked onto a studio backlot on a Thursday morning in 1971 and saw Bruce Lee rehearsing a fight sequence. He stopped walking. He watched for 10 minutes. He went home that evening, sat at his desk, and opened the screenplay that was finished. He rewrote it. Not a scene. Not a line. Not a single piece of dialogue. He rewrote the core of what the story was about. Nobody on the project knew why. He never explained it in any meeting. He never put it in any interview. He made the change, delivered the new draft, and said nothing. But one person, his script supervisor on 3 consecutive films, a woman who knew his process better than he did, said she knew. Because she had been on the backlot that morning. She had seen what he saw. And she understood that 10 minutes of watching Bruce Lee move had shown Clint Eastwood something about his own character. His own cinematic creation, the thing he had been building for years, that he had been unable to see from the inside. To understand what Eastwood saw that morning, you have to understand what Clint Eastwood was trying to build in 1971. By 1971, Eastwood was no longer just a movie star. He was becoming something more specific and more deliberate than that. He was building a character, not a role, not a performance. A character that lived across films, that accumulated meaning the way a real person accumulates history, and that represented something about masculinity, about silence, about the relationship between a man and violence that American cinema had never quite captured. The man with no name. Dirty Harry. The variations on the archetype that Eastwood kept refining, film by film, with the patient precision of a sculptor removing stone. The character was dangerous. That was the first thing. But the specific quality of the danger was what Eastwood spent years trying to get right. Most cinematic danger is loud. It announces itself. The villain monologues. The hero makes speeches before the showdown. The violence is preceded by performance, by the theater of confrontation that signals to the audience. Something is about to happen. Eastwood was building something different. He was building a man who was dangerous the way a loaded weapon is dangerous. Not because of what it is doing, because of what it is capable of, because of the stillness, because of the absence of any wasted signal. He had been trying to put that into words for years. He had been trying to explain it to cinematographers, to editors, to writers. He could not find the language. And then, on a Thursday morning on a studio backlot, he saw it. Not in words. In a body. The backlot was the kind of controlled chaos that always surrounds a working film production. Trucks. Equipment. Crew members in headsets carrying clipboards and coffee. The particular noise of a large machine doing something that looks, from the outside, like confusion and is, from the inside, highly organized. Eastwood was there for a meeting. Something routine, a costume fitting, or a production discussion. The script supervisor could not remember which. He arrived early, as he almost always did. He was walking toward the production office when he heard something. Not a crash. Not a shout. Not any of the sounds that normally make you stop on a busy set. A sound he could not immediately identify. Fast. Rhythmic. Clean. He turned toward it. On a cleared section of the lot, maybe 40 feet by 40 feet, roped off from the rest of the chaos, a man was rehearsing. Alone. No partner. No choreographer calling out moves. No director watching through a monitor. Just a man and the space around him. The man was not large. He was not particularly tall. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt and dark trousers, and from a distance of perhaps 30 feet, he looked like any of the dozens of people moving across that lot. But he was moving differently from every other person on that lot. Eastwood stopped walking. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe, I post rare stories every day. The script supervisor saw Eastwood stop. She described it later as one of the strangest things she had ever seen. Because Clint Eastwood did not stop. He was not a man who was distracted on set. He arrived, he worked, he moved from point to point with the directional efficiency of a man who knew exactly where he was going and had no interest in anything that was not on his route. He stopped. He stood there. And he watched. Bruce Lee was rehearsing a fight sequence from what would eventually become Enter the Dragon. She did not know this at the time. She saw a man she did not recognize running through what appeared to be a series of choreographed movements, but movements of a quality and a speed and a precision that made the word choreographed feel immediately wrong. Because choreography implies planning. It implies a gap between the design and the execution, the moment where the body is following instructions, translating the diagram into action. Bruce Lee had eliminated that gap. What she saw and what Eastwood saw, standing 30 feet away on a busy studio lot, was not a man executing choreography. It was a man for whom the movement and the intention were the same thing. There was no preparation visible in his body. No telegraphing. No build-up to the strike that told the eye. Here comes the strike. One moment he was still. The next moment the movement was already in its middle. The next moment it was finished. And the stillness that followed each movement was the same quality of stillness that preceded it. Perfect. Complete. Like a sentence that begins and ends with silence and says everything in between without wasting a single word. Eastwood watched for 10 minutes. The script supervisor timed it. She was standing behind him, slightly to the left. She could see his face in three-quarter profile. She said he did not blink very much. She said his expression was the expression she had seen on his face only 3 other times in the years she had worked with him. Twice in the editing room when he was watching a cut that he knew was exactly right, and once on a location scout when he found the landscape he had been looking for. The expression of a man who has just found the thing he did not know he was looking for. After 10 minutes, a production assistant approached Bruce Lee with a radio. Some message. A change of schedule or a question from the director. Bruce Lee stopped, listened, nodded, and turned to follow the assistant. He passed within about 15 feet of Eastwood. Their eyes met for a moment. Eastwood nodded once. Bruce Lee nodded back. They did not speak. They had never met and would never formally meet. But something had passed between them, the recognition of two people who are building the same thing from different materials in different rooms and have just, for one moment, glimpsed each other's work through an open door. Bruce Lee walked away. Eastwood stood there for a moment longer. Then he turned and went to his meeting. That evening Eastwood went home. He ate dinner. He sat in his living room for a while. He did not, by any account, rush to his desk. He did not have the frantic energy of a man who has just been struck by inspiration and cannot wait to get it down on paper. He was quiet, thoughtful, the way he always was when something was working inside him that had not yet become words. He went to his desk around 9 o'clock. He opened the screenplay. He read it, all of it, from the first page to the last. Something he had not done since finishing the final draft. And when he finished, he sat for a long time without moving. The script supervisor learned what happened next from Eastwood himself. Not in a conversation about Bruce Lee, not in any context where the connection was made explicit, but in a conversation about the character. About the man. About what he had always wanted the silence to mean and why he felt, for the first time, that he finally understood it well enough to write it correctly. He said, "I always thought the stillness was about control. About a man who has so much power that he does not need to demonstrate it. That the silence was a kind of threat, the silence of a weapon that is loaded and waiting." He said, "I was wrong about that. Or rather, I was only half right." He said, "The stillness is not about control. It is about completion. A man who has no gap between what he is and what he does not need to fill the silence with performance. He does not need to signal. He does not need to threaten. He is simply there. And the presence of what he is, fully, completely, without any part of it being held back or managed or shaped for an audience, is enough." He rewrote the screenplay that night. He worked until past 2 in the morning. When he delivered the new draft, his producer read it and came to him with a question. he said. What changed? Eastwood said. I finally understood what the silence means. The script supervisor spent the next several months putting together what Eastwood had seen with what she had read in the new draft. The changes were not dramatic. They were surgical. Scenes that had previously given the character moments of explanation. Small lines of dialogue where he articulated his reasoning, small gestures where his motivation was made visible to the audience, were stripped away. Not because they were bad scenes. Because they were unnecessary. The new character did not explain himself. Did not signal his intentions. Did not fill the space between actions with anything that could be mistaken for performance. He simply arrived. He did what he came to do. He left. And the effect was something that critics and audiences would spend decades trying to describe but never quite capture in words. Because what Eastwood had put on screen, what he had understood from 10 minutes of watching a man rehearse alone on a studio lot, was the specific quality of danger that lives not in what a person does but in what they contain. The danger of completeness. The danger of a person who has no gap between themselves and their action. Who does not announce. Who does not perform. Who is simply, fully, entirely without residue what they are. Bruce Lee had shown him that. Not with words. Not with a conversation. With 10 minutes of a white t-shirt moving through a cleared space on a studio backlit on a Thursday morning. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day. Here is what this story is really about. Two men. Two separate careers. Two completely different arts. One man was using his body to say something that language could not say. The other man was spending years trying to put that same thing into film, into images, into character, into the architecture of a story told through a camera, and could not find the final piece. They were building the same thing, from different ends. And for 10 minutes on a Thursday morning, they were in the same place at the same time, and one of them saw what the other had figured out. That is the rarest collision in the creative world. Not inspiration, not theft, not imitation, recognition. The moment when you see another person's solution to the problem you have been working on and you understand it not with your mind but with your body, with the deep, wordless intelligence that knows a thing before it can be spoken. Clint Eastwood felt that recognition in his chest, standing 30 feet from a man he had never met and would never formally meet. And he went home and did what artists do when they finally understand something they have been reaching for. He put it on the page. And then he put it on the screen. And then the world watched it. For 50 years. Bruce Lee died in 1973. He never saw the film that his 10 minutes of rehearsal had quietly shaped. He never knew that a man who would become one of the most studied directors in cinema had stood 30 feet away from him on a backlit and had his understanding of an entire character reorganized by what he saw. He was just rehearsing. The thing he did every day. Without an audience. Without any awareness that the man standing 30 feet away was filing everything into a part of his mind that would not open again until 9 o'clock that evening. That is the thing about Bruce Lee that nobody ever fully grasped. He did not have to try to change the people around him. He changed them by being completely himself. So completely, so thoroughly, without performance, without intention, without any awareness of the effect. He just showed up. He did the thing. He moved through the space. And the people who saw it went home different. Not because he was trying to change them. Because he was not trying to do anything except be exactly what he was. And that, in a world where almost everyone is performing almost all of the time, was the most radical thing a human being could do.